Okay, welcome everyone. Our very first AU Core work group meeting. We have graduated from TDG and we are now officially a work group. So this is our first meeting to kick that off, and I've got the pleasure of being the co-chair today. So I'll take you through. We'll start with an acknowledgement of country. HL7 Australia acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So, a reminder about who your co-chairs are for this new e-requesting. I still think I'm posting an e-requesting. The AU Core work group. So I'm one of the co-chairs. I'm a Fire Solution Architect on Spark for CSIRO. We've also got Andrew and Ricardo, Timothy, Landon, Jovan, and Steve, who are all our co-chairs moving forward with this work group. So we're all available for you to reach out and speak to us about anything you'd like to bring to meetings in the future and the like. And we have some other support people like Danielle and that who are still supporting the projects within AU Core, but will be the primary co-chairs taking you through these meetings. So with our meeting today, this is our agenda running forward with these meetings. We're going to split it into two parts where we're going to have work group business, where we're going to talk about things to do with the work group. And then this main call is also where we're going to talk about AU Core Fire AG project work. So a bit of a distinction there between things that are generic to the work group and then project specific items. We also have the AU patient summary Fire AG project as well. Now, generally that won't be gone through in this meeting. We have a Friday meeting for that that we do separately. There's normally a meeting tomorrow, but given that's Good Friday, that's going to move to the Friday after. So you should, if you're interested in that project, you should have an invite for that, which is moved to next Friday. But otherwise, we're going to do work group business. We're going to talk about the polls for ongoing meeting times with the end of daylight savings, go through the mission and charter for the work group, and then getting into AU Core project work. When Ricardo talked to us about the endpoint proposal, and Heath's going to talk to us about AU Core composition. He's been doing a number of information sessions on that and bring this one to the TDG. So, usual business. We'll start off with approval of meeting minutes. We've got two lots of minutes here. The 10th was the face-to-face in Sydney prior to the Connectathon. And the other one was the last fortnight's meeting. So I don't have those here for us. I'll put it in the chat as well. So this was the face-to-face meeting. It wasn't online. We've got all the minutes for that recording. There was no recording for this one, given it was face-to-face, but we do have a very detailed set of minutes here. And then we've got the second one, which was from a fortnight ago, our regular online TDG. Yeah, that was the last of the TDG meetings. So we've got the minutes for that one there, as well as the recording and the like. I don't think we have any comments on any of these for any changes, but I'll open it up if anyone has any changes they'd like to make, or if anyone's interested in making a motion to approve these minutes. We can do them as a group or separately, depending on the interest.
I'll motion to approve both sets in the same vote.
Great, thank you, Stuart. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second Steve Swinsburg.
Great, thanks, Steve. If there's no other questions, I will launch a poll. I can find it. Approval of minutes, that looks like us. So you should see a poll there. If you can't vote or online, you can either put it in the chat or you can call your name out and do your vote verbally. Right, and we've got about 15, 16, nearly all the participants are done. Okay, I'll give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'll end that poll. We have 9 in the poll plus 1 in the chat, so 10 affirmative. We have 0 negative, and we have 9 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to more usual business. I went through the last few meetings and dug out a couple of action items were there. I'm not actually sure whether they're all still relevant or not. I think the first one would be, given that there was an action item for the co-chairs to move an item to the new terminology work group and the technical steering committee. Given that they haven't started yet, I think that will still be a to-do action item on the co-chairs. And then the second one was, I think in the last meeting, Richard was going to email the co-chairs about an agenda item for discussing relaxing constraint and organisation identifier. I don't know if Richard's on this call. I don't think I saw him.
Richard is on leave, so he'll be back next month.
Okay.
So we'll probably have to carry this one. But I'll chase this one up with the team, see if someone else has been doing this for him while he's away.
Yep, no problems. Did anyone else know of any action items that we had? There were 2 that I dug out of recent meetings. But if anyone else knows of anything, you can let us know. On to some updates. We have a Spark Community Co-Design workshop coming up again. So the last one of these we had in Hobart, which was a huge success. This is a continuation from that one. We've got 2 days. The first day is the clinical design group, and the second day is the AU Core work group. Both of them focused on encounter record, so a continuation of what we did in Hobart, with a bit of a focus on the use of AI scribes and the like as well. So if you have any interest in that, that's going to be in Brisbane. I think Shelley just put the link in the chat so you can get tickets. So in Brisbane on the 27th and 28th of May. I would definitely encourage people to go to both days if you can, even if being this the technical group, you do get a lot out of listening to what the clinicians have to say through the clinical group, and likewise the clinicians coming to the technical group side. I think it's a really good opportunity to get that crossover that we often don't get in these meetings. So if you are interested, think about going to both days. I think you'll get a lot out of it. And there's an Eventbrite there to register for tickets. Another upcoming Sparked event, we put an expression of interest out for a Spark testing event in the middle of the year. That has now closed. We got a good number of results, so thank you everyone who responded to that EOI. We'll definitely be going ahead with an event. There was plenty of interest to have this event. We're just finalising the venue and the date. So as soon as that has been finalised, we'll release tickets. We'll send out a request for interest in that. And that's going to be a really cross all the streams of the IGs that we have out there at the moment, from AU Core, patient summary, e-requesting, smart forms, the Health Connect Australia provider directory. So it's an opportunity to really test across all the streams. You don't have to be in a silo and try and get all these things working together. So that's going to be a great event. And as soon as the tickets are available, we'll let you know about that. Also in the, I think our last meeting, we talked about having what time the meetings will change to with the end of daylight savings. So daylight savings ends next week or over the weekend. I think it is over the weekend. Yes. So we decided to have some Zulip polls. We've had those polls up on Zulip since the last meeting now. So the outcomes of those polls was this AU Core main call will remain at its 11 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So for Brisbane, no change. For the states that had daylight saving, it will now be an hour earlier. And the patient summary for our IG call is going to remain the same as well at its 10 a.m. Friday. Australian Eastern Standard Time slots. So there was, we'll continue with that time moving forward. The meeting invites for the new series will come out shortly as well. I might be able to get those out today if I can. There's a new process for us creating these meeting invites. You may have seen over the last couple of weeks, we've had some problems with sending out meeting invites, them being cancelled, you're getting multiple. We're really sorry for that. It's been a bit of a teething problem just getting the new list servers set up for emailing. But we've seemed to have that sorted now, and you'll see the emails come out from the Australia Workgroup email, and we'll have better management over those calendar entries now. So hopefully we won't have the problems moving forward. So you'll see those invites come out. You'll see all invites for HL7 workgroup stuff come from the same email now, rather than various individuals that you may have got them from before. So hopefully we've streamlined that process. The next thing on the workgroup agenda was the review of the mission and charter. So we had a very quick look at this in the last meeting, requesting feedback on it. So as a work group now, we're no longer a technical design group. So we need our own mission and charter as a work group. We did have a draft one, or sorry, we had one for the establishment, but this is our opportunity to review it and update it. And then we'll submit it back to the technical steering committee for their acceptance. So it's something that we need, if we need as part of work group. The mission is really the reason the work group was formed and the high level objectives guiding its focus and effort. And then the charter is the specific artifacts that we create and the contributions to HL7 Australia strategic initiatives, our relationships with HL7 AU groups, our relationship with groups outside of HL7 Australia, and basically that then helps us prevent scope creep and extensive overlap with other work groups. So we might go through this in a little bit of detail now. Jump to the page. I'll put it in the chat. Oh, someone already beat me to it. Great job, Shelley. Thank you. So this is just really an update of the mission and charter from what we had. So we had a terms of reference for the technical design group. Now it's changed into a mission and charter, but it is very similar. So it's just been slightly updated for that to turn it into a mission and charter. So most of this wording is what we had for the technical design group. If you are curious about what the old one was, just zoom that a little bit. Down in the archive section of our new Confluence site, there is the old sparked AU Core, that's the welcome pack, the terms of reference, it's this one here, sorry. This was our TDG terms of reference. You'll see it had a mission and charter in that as well. So it was very similar. So we're just adapting it now to the work group. So this part hasn't really changed in the mission. So the mission of the AU Core work group is to precisely articulate the requirements and specifications necessary to promote seamless interoperability among clinical and non-clinical systems within Australian context, setting clear standards, profiling the necessary file artifacts to ensure that systems can effectively record, update, search, and retrieve core digital health, clinical, and administrative information. So that's what we had for the TDG. That's unchanged, other than now says work group rather than TDG. The same for the charter. So we talk about the work products and contributions to HL7 AU processes. So basically, what the work group is responsible for hasn't changed. Talking about a number of these dot points, we've just explicitly called out that we develop and maintain the AU Core Fire Implementation Guide, and we develop and maintain the AU Patient Summary Fire Implementation Guide. So just made sure that they're explicitly called out. The next two have changed a little bit, so that the formal relationship with HL7 AU groups and accelerators. So we're saying that the AU Core work group has projects that are part of the Spark Australian Fire Accelerator. So both of our projects in this work group are part of Spark. Both AU Core and Patient Summary are Spark projects. We may have projects in the future that are not part of Spark. At the moment we do. So this is just saying that we have projects that are part of the accelerator. And then the relationships with groups outside of HL7 Australia. So our work group has relationship with the Spark Clinical Design Group and the Australian Clinical Data for Interoperability, the AUCDI, which defines the health data classes and constituent data elements for nationwide interoperability health information exchange. So the work group has projects that are responsible for technical specifications that implement the exchange of AUCDI elements. So you'll see that in our fire IGs, we always map back to AUCDI. So this is just calling that out. And the work group will also participate in the Spark Harmonisation Group, which provides cross-domain escalation and alignment pathways between the clinical design groups, AUCDI, and HL7 Australia projects. So we're just calling that out explicitly, that we will also participate in harmonisation group between the clinical and technical groups. So we only got one comment on this, which was from Tor, which was talking about refining that statement at the end there about the harmonisation group. I took that feedback and we've incorporated, so it is in there as it stands. So we didn't have any other feedback on the page. Did anyone else on the call have any feedback about this? Want to raise any questions about it? If we are comfortable with this, I think we probably should have a vote and say that we accept this as the work group. The process then would be that once the technical steering committee is set up, we will take it to it and say that the AU Core work group would like to have this as its mission and charter. They'll review it and ensure alignment and accept it there. So if anyone is interested, I'm open to a motion to accept this.
Happy to put forward the motion, Michael.
Thanks,
So
Ricardo.
I'd like to submit a motion that we accept, as that the AU Core work group, that we accept the AU Core work group mission and charter as seen on this page in Confluence, and that we take it to the next level to seek formal endorsement or agreement.
Great. Thanks, Ricardo. Do I have a second for that?
Yep, second that, Steve Swinsburg.
Thank you, Steve. Do you have any other questions or comments before I launch a vote on that? No. All right. One poll. Vote for the current motion. So hopefully you'll see that pop up. Again, you can vote on the chat or by calling out if you don't have access. I think we've had most people vote, so I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. So we have 15 in the poll plus 1 in the chat, so 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. It's great. I think that gives us a good footing moving forward. And through the new governance arrangements now. Okay, now we're out of AU Core workgroup business and we're going to move into project business. Here we're going to start talking about the AU Core Fire IG project, which is where we spend most of our time in these meetings, and we'll continue to do that. So just a couple of project updates. There is still the input into the diagnostic report. So there is a Confluence page for this, just talking about vendor support, as in what you support the diagnostic report. We will have some sessions coming in the future about diagnostic reports. So the more information we can capture here, the better. So if you're able to contribute to that, that will be great. We also have a number of Zort polls that are still open at the moment. One there's about the identifier type, which was Richard's, which I think he's going to bring to a future meeting when he's back. Endpoint, Ricardo's actually going to talk to us a bit about endpoint today. Diagnostic report, we just talked about that one. And then there's another one, which I think is a new profile to support subsections. So all of these are still open, I believe, for future discussion. So again, the more we can contribute there, the better informed our discussions will be coming into meetings. So next, Ricardo, you're going to talk to us about endpoints.
Thanks.
Did you want to drive, or do you want me to jump through this stuff?
It's actually going to be Stuart
Stuart.
Hansen, who will take us
there
through
we
this
go.
proposal. So yeah, over to you, Stuart.
Do you want to drive, Stuart?
Yeah, if that's okay. I'll see if it allows me.
Should do. I'll stop.
All right, hypothetically that works.
Yep. You can see it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. So I'm back here to talk about the work that we've done on endpoints. So as a quick recap, we took this to the community session a couple of weeks ago. We walked through the proposal to introduce an endpoint via profile into AU Core R3. We have done some work on that. We want to bring you up to speed on sort of where we are and what we've done. So I will flag that the proposal itself hasn't changed. We're still looking to establish the profile in AU Core R3, but we have changed the scope a little bit on how we will get there. But I'll go through that on the next sort of couple of slides. So a bit of background, we're proposing the AU Core R3 endpoint profile to support secure messaging, fire-based exchange, and align agency fire specs with AU Core, AU Base, and maintain our compatibility with NHSD and the HCPD implementations that are already out there. And we can start to set up a bare bones profile for endpoint in Core. So after we took to community a couple of weeks ago, the suggestion was made to us that we implement the profile in AU Base, then constrain it in AU Core. So we can have our consistent terminology and value sets and then reuse that profile in other areas if we need to. So we've drafted a base profile for endpoints, and we'll look to release that very soon for feedback as well. And then we've started constraining and deriving that base profile into Core. Got straight past it. There we go. So currently, this is what we've put together with the help of Sam and Uday as well for AU Base. And this is the draft structure for the endpoint profile, how it sits today on our staging environment. So we've got a couple of slices for extensions to help with that backwards compatibility. So we've got receiving facility, receiving application, environment type, IG supported, and our encryption certificates as well. And then we've started out with status, connection type, payload type, and address. They've been constrained down in Core. I'll show you those on the next couple of slides. And we've also added name for Core as well. So this is just going to serve as the base profile, and then we'll push that down into Core as well. So sitting in our Core draft at the moment, we have our same slices from base that we have also constrained where they need to be constrained, and they're derived from that base endpoint as well. And then we've moved our, and then we've derived those and added the name obligation as well, which was mandated, I believe, as being required for use within endpoint. So that's been added to Core as well. We've put together just a bit of a table so that we can see where everything has come from, why we've got it there, and what we're using it for. So the receiving facility and the receiving application already exist in base, and they help with SMD. So we're referencing them rather than sort of recreating them. We've grabbed environment type as well from R5, R6, and then bound that to the endpoint environment type value set with preferred. We've got IG supported, which was adapted from our NDH. Sorry, not ours, from NDH in the US. And then that lets us advertise which IG guides it supports. Brett flagged this as something that we should be using at our community session a couple of weeks ago. We've got the encryption certificates in there as well for endpoint auth. They're already used in AU base. And then for status, name, and address, there's no additional constraints on these apart from the must supports. Connection type we've added, and that's come from the AUPD with a binding to the Australian connection type value set as preferred in base. And then we've constrained that down to extensible in core. Same with the payload type that has the Australian payload type value set and then constrained as extensible in core. And then we have the address with the must support and the obligations applied as well. So that's what we've set up at the moment for core and for base. The rationale behind those elements and sort of where we've sourced those from, why they're there, and sort of what we're hoping to do with them, how we plan to use them. From here, we will put forward the official proposal on the 16th of April at the next working group. We'll present that at the FIRE working group on the 22nd. The agreed AU and core will be submitted to FIRE working group for the 6th of May for base. The core proposal submitted for voting to core working group on the 14th. This is a tentative schedule and it may change, but we'll see how we go. Heath? You're on mute.
Can I ask a question about one of the extensions?
Absolutely can.
The environment type. What's that supporting? Is that a legacy one or MV2, or is that something different?
That one came from R5, R6, and we found that's the AU endpoint environment type value set. So that sets out, I believe from memory, what it is that you're exposing.
Production, development, testing.
Okay.
Business verification. It allows you to classify the type of environment you encounter on that endpoint.
Why would we be publishing anything other than production?
Good question. I think there might be opportunities for you to have, for example, A and B type test scenarios, and you might have production A, production B. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to be something that will be entirely relevant or not, but it's good question. I guess it's probably something we can certainly discuss with the community, but the first kind of thought that came to mind was circumstances where you might have A/B testing or A/B scenarios at play, and you might want to direct traffic based on certain conditions to one or the other, and they would both still be production, for example. Don't know.
Thank you.
Stuart, was the intent here today just as a bit of a preview, a bit of a show you where you're at, and then our next meeting is where we'll have a bit more of a deep dive in this? Is that the intent here?
Yeah, that's correct, Michael. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think we'll have the opportunity to go through this in a reasonable bit more detail at the next one. Is there a Confluence page to go with this, or that'll be developed?
It will be published in the coming days, so we'll make it available. I guess right now was just to, as Stuart has said, just to give everybody a quick look. This kind of almost flags or ring fences what we're planning on kind of addressing as part of this work, and getting thoughts from people that could still be incorporated to correct, I guess, our trajectory. So I think that's the main idea. Yep.
I noticed that there is a page already in the Confluence under the work group. Is that we're just going to pad that out a bit more with content?
Yeah. So the links. So we're trying to sort out how we'll make this available on GitHub, feature branch or whatever. We go forward with that, and that will be published on that Confluence page. So when it's available there for people to provide, let's say, feedback, we will just notify the group that it's live. It's still not there yet. I guess one of the changes, and Stuart also alluded to this, is that we need to go and do some work on base. So I think whatever we do, it now needs to kind of take the two streams into consideration. But both will be available there for people to go and have a look at in the coming days.
Okay, that's great. Did anyone else have any other questions for Stuart before we move on?
I do just want to pick a quick call out as well to Mark's feedback in the Zulip discussion. I'll put a link to Zulip in the chat as well. We were hoping Mark would be here to speak to this today, but it looks like he's taking an extended long weekend. Frankly, I don't blame him. But Mark has raised some points that we've put some consideration into in the way that we've drafted these profiles as well. And then Brett's provided some feedback for us on the Confluence. So we've taken those into consideration as well. But if anybody else has any other comments or questions, feel free to put them in. In the Zulip, the link's in the chat for you there. Brett?
Oh yeah, I had a chat with Mark, and he's talked me down from some of my requirements, trying to simplify some of this. So I think I think I was Mark's proposals were good, and I think that's pretty workable stuff. So just wanted to say that's good.
Yeah. I think one thing that you'll probably see is that the extension for the implementation guide supported has been dialed down a little bit, also based on this feedback. So I think
Cool.
the double handling or the potential issue where sources of truth, start to diverge, and therefore you no longer have a valid source of truth. It's a big one, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't happen through the work that we're proposing, and that means probably capturing less in the endpoint and letting the fire smarts do the work down the track when you tap into the URL.
Yeah, looking at what you presented, it's looking good from my perspective. It's lean, but covers the legacy requirements.
Yeah, it is lean by design as well. We don't want to put too much in immediately and then have to pull it all back later. We'd rather put in something that works and then sort of build on top of that as we go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key points with us putting it in base and core, right? Is that we don't want to constrain it too much. The downstream IGs can do that. So, like you provide a directory. Okay. Moving on, unless there's any other questions. Heath, I think Heath's been taking us through some information sessions. We've had 2 information sessions to date that on composition. And Heath's going to continue the conversation today. And Heath, you've got the rest of the meeting. So you've got 50 minutes, basically. So as much time as you need to take us through this.
Thank you. Probably need most of it too. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of background. This topic around an AU core composition proposal has been discussed in a number of forums already. So back in the Hobart face-to-face, it was raised as part of a working group. Was it? No, it was wrong meeting. And I don't remember what city we were in. It might have been Sydney. It was a working group meeting, face-to-face one, where I put this proposal up as a very high level proposal. We had a really good debate there. Then I started doing some information sessions starting last week, last Friday, I think it was, where we didn't get, well, we had a really good conversation, but didn't get very far other than basically getting agreement on the scope, which was very good. So we had another session this Tuesday, I believe it was, where we started to go through some must support elements, etc. And again, some really good conversation around that. So I just want to go over those couple of topics, but then hopefully get a little bit further. But if we get the opportunity and we get some agreement, I'm hoping that we might be able to actually make some decisions, because this is a working group meeting. And I believe it was on the agenda in time for us to make decisions. So I think is that right, Michael? We're able to potentially
Yeah, I
make
think,
motions and
yep,
stuff.
definitely. I think with this is probably incremental. We can make decisions as we go and build this up. So if we're in a position where we feel comfortable, absolutely make a motion and vote on those.
So conscious that there is a number of people on the call that's been through the entire journey with me, and there might be a number that actually haven't as well. So this might be all new. But I just wanted to revisit something, if it's okay, Michael, around what are the principles of inclusion of profiles in AU Core. So these originated in release 1. We also applied them for release 2, and I would suspect that we should be considering these as similar principles. We haven't revisited or agreed, but in the context of release 3, I'm assuming that we would be applying very similar principles. So basically, in a nutshell, we're talking about that there is context in to AU CDI, so there's a relationship for the data elements to be, or concepts to be, already defined in AU CDI. That there is a current standard that supports these, including terminologies, and usually those standards are the Fire Core standard. And SNOMED and NTCS, NTCS, yes, I think that's the right way of saying it, that it's current use. So the data element is captured, stored, and accessed in several production systems now, and it's used for current exchange. So that we're actually exchanging this data. We're not just capturing it in the systems, we are actually exchanging it. And using interoperable standards, and that the use case has a breadth of applicability, that it's across most care settings and specialties, and in particular within Australia is what we really is the main context here. So we also have this where we basically say, if all of those criteria are pretty much, those principles are catered for, but also it's supported in US Core, IPS, and IPA, then it's definitely in scope. There's a couple of if it's not in a CDI, but there's high community interest from the technical community, that is, then we may consider it, etc. So I don't want to dwell too much on that, but this is on the wiki. So the reason I presented that was to just provide some guardrails around making our decisions, that we're not necessarily talking about potential use cases for the future, but at the same time, we shouldn't be excluding potential use cases. So again, similar to the endpoint scenario, we want to keep these things lean. We don't want to tighten it down too far so that people can't use it, but also have some sort of scope of that boundaries around the scope of what the use of this profile is for. I presented this again in Sydney, basically what is the proposal, that we're looking for a composition profile that derives from AU-based composition we already have. We need to set some must support. We need to suggest their obligations. We need to look at our value set bindings. We need to look at search parameters. All of these things are necessary for us to have a useful profile in AU Core. Why? There's a little bit of a statement there around the purpose, and why now. It's really because via documents, we already have a patient summary document, but there there is certainly a growing need for more documents within Australia. So let's get in before there's too many inconsistencies between systems, but it also enables implementers to perhaps consider their implementations in a more general context rather than specific ones like patient summary. And then if some other use case comes around, that we need to deal with that separately. So it's those sorts of reasons why the proposal has come forth. So fast forwarding to last Friday, as I said, we had a really good discussion about what is the scope of this composition profile. So I there's basically we've refined what was in that original proposal in the previous slide around the why, and we've actually refined a couple of things in here and to try and nail it down around what it is that we're actually doing here. And some of the discussion that we had on Friday started to say what we're actually doing with this profile is to support clinical documents, FHIR clinical documents in particular. We're not trying to have a profile that might just be available through a FHIR API, a REST API. We're actually talking about exchange of a composition as part of a FHIR document. And the second part is that it is for a subject of care. So generally, and in as well as in AU base composition, the subject element is optional. So what we're actually talking about, because again, AU Core, AU Core has a core requirement that you shall at least implement the patient resource. That kind of implies that while we're talking about patient records here, so hence a subject of care is actually very relevant scoping of this. And we didn't want to go down a rabbit hole of supporting other things like documentation about equipment or those sorts of things. So we really wanted to pull it back to that subject of care. Of course, it's within the Australian context. The second dot point is just perhaps a little bit extra context, which is talking about it underpins the data requirements of AU patient summary, because that's the one that's very relevant to us at the moment. And that is one of the drivers for having this profile, is that we can have an AU core profile that we can derive from in AU patient summary. We currently don't have that. We're deriving it, I think off the top of my head, maybe deriving from IPS composition at the moment, which is a different pattern to what we're doing for a lot of the other AUPS profiles, where we're deriving directly from AU Core. I've put in the word there while reviewing this morning, data exchange requirements, because that is what AU Core is about. It again, we're talking about exchange, where, for example, AU CDI is more about data requirements. So this is about data exchange requirements. And I've also considered striking out the word future in which was what I presented earlier this week. On Tuesday, I think as well, we looked at this. I got some feedback on the Tuesday meeting through the chat that that sort of this idea of future was a little bit potentially problematic. And I think it just generalizes the requirements so that we don't have to future-proof this. So we'll have to make changes later. Ricardo.
Thanks, Sid. Just double checking something with you. And this is on the back of a comment that I think Danielle made last week. So if we agreed to narrow this down to clinical documents, or is it documents? Because I think in the past when this was raised, I think she was more inclined to start with potentially a concept that's a bit more high level of document and then potentially doing some work on the clinical document afterwards. But I just wanted to check if this discussion has been had and we kind of consciously deciding that it's the clinical document we're going to be focusing on.
Well, I guess my immediate response to that is the second part of that sentence, which is for a subject of care. So I guess to me that implies a clinical document
Yep.
because there is actually a subject of care. And I guess that's what we need to get agree on. And again, not it's not. We talked about what's the name of this thing, and I don't think we need to get hung up or have that conversation at this point in time. Maybe if we can at least get agreement on the scope, then we can probably look at name at some point. I would prefer to get through some other stuff today, but come back to maybe a name another time. But we certainly have talked about whether the name of this thing should be a patient composition was one of the terms that was used. We've talked about it being a document composition, all those sorts of things. So whether it's a clinical document composition, but I think for me today, it is the scope statement that I would like to get agreement on. And that's literally what I'm looking for here.
Yep.
And sorry, there's a bit of an issue with the duplication of that, but can we get agreement on this scope and purpose in principle, wordsmithing and stuff aside, and the words, that's the better words that I'm hoping to use. So, but basically the question is, can we get agreement in principle that this is the scope and purpose of this profile?
Heath, I was just going to clarify that you're talking about the patient summary. It derives from AU base composition. So that's the support here for having an AU core one, so that we're not deriving from AU base. We'd actually be deriving from AU core then from patient summary.
So if the scope is limited to critical document, I don't have a strong objections to that, but it does open up another question that in future, if we need to support non-clinical use of the composition, then we might have to create a different AU core composition to support that. Is that the direction that we are clear that we want to take, or we want to make it a bit vaguer, so therefore it has the ability to support both clinical and non-clinical uses?
Well, that's the question to you guys, right? So for me, my direct response to you, we've still got AU base composition that you could derive from for anything else. In the context of AU core, my personal opinion is that we are talking about patient records. And hence, it is a clinical document for a subject of care because we're talking about AU core. I know that there's a little bit of, we've got organizations and all those sorts of other resource types, but because of that idea of that, if you're AU core compliant, you shall support the AU core patient resource. I kind of feel that this is the space we're working in when we're talking about core. Obviously, things like patient directories and stuff like that might come off of core as well in the future, but which deviates from that. But this primarily, what I'm proposing is that it is a clinical document composition.
And as I said,
and we might have some other kind of document profile in the moment, but I really, for R3, would like to scope it down to this.
And as I said earlier, I don't have a strong objection to that, but having involved in the international space as well, I know that at least from the US and other jurisdictions or realms, they do want to support, like say, for example, other administrative and also financial exchange of the file composition, for example, insurance claims. So as long as we are clear that that's our scope for now, and in the future, if we want to revisit the scope, we might have to create a different AU core composition to support those non-clinical users. If we make it upfront and clear, then I don't have any problem with that. It's just that I want to raise other use cases that's outside the clinical realm that will also need to use the AU core composition as well. So if we are clear that that's the limit, the scope limitations that we are working on, then we make it upfrontly clear, then I am okay with that.
Okay, great.
I think by narrowing the scope makes it clearer for us about the intended use, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't involve in future releases, whether that's another profile or broadening the scope of this existing profile. I think you would determine at the time what's most appropriate. So it's really saying that this is what we are looking for now, and this is the narrowed scope for now. But as always, we're continually evolving AU Core. And what's required next, these can evolve into.
Yeah,
And when we
my
get to
hesitation about sort of scope changes in future is about backward compatibility. We might have to bite the bullet that so we will have two different
Oh,
AU core
absolutely, yeah.
composition patterns. That will be fine. Yeah.
That's one option, and the other maybe it can just be broadened with the existing profile. So again, depending on the change and whether it's a breaking change and the like, but all that would be determined. But we're not locked into this forever, right? So this, I think, is key.
And the other aspect is we are actually talking about obligations from a requester's perspective. So if we broaden this out too far for requesters to things that aren't necessarily patient clinical documents, then we are putting a huge burden on requesters to support all kind of documents or compositions that they don't really care about. So that's, again, one reason why I'm pretty keen to keep this focused. And yes, I have no problems with it being another profile. And then systems like requesters can say, well, I support the administrative composition, and I also implement this clinical composition. Yoni?
No, I was just going to reinforce that point here that it's absolutely unnecessary at this point for everyone to implement other than clinical, compositions as well, because as you point out, there's going to be many interests out there. Of course, we understand that, and we can always broaden it later than enforcing everyone doing it now.
So if I would like to motion that we accept this as the scope for the AU Core composition profile.
Okay, thanks, Heath. Does someone like to second that motion, Heath?
Happy to second, Yoni.
Thanks, Yoni. Has anyone got any questions or further comments before I launch a poll to vote on that?
Yeah, I've got one, Michael. Brett here. Just would we contemplate the naming of this profile, since it is more specific?
That's not part of my motion, Brett.
Yeah. Do we do that as a separate?
That's okay. Yeah, I just kind of feel it like it's because it's totally general. It might be better to come back to that and say exactly what we're doing. Yeah.
My feeling is we agree on the scope, and then we can later agree on the name. I hope that I don't really want to go there today, if that's okay.
That's
need
good.
to go there. I completely agree. And
that's fine. I'm happy with that. Thanks.
I don't know whether we want to put this into the motion of some sort. I'm completely open to the a different name. So
let's
I'm
go ahead with
tying
scope
down the name.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, let's go ahead with scope, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is just to clarify clarification that this motion is on the scope. It's only on the scope of it. It's not necessarily not the name.
It's not necessarily the exact words that would be used. I will leave that to the editors, but that's why I'm talking about it's more in principle. And the wording will be sort of dealt with the editors, the profile.
Okay. We all happy with that? After I launch the poll.
Thank you.
All right. Launch the vote. And we've got a pretty good number of votes there. Nearly everyone has voted. I'll finish that in 3, 2, 1. The poll. So we had 20 in the vote plus 1 in the chat. So 21 affirmative, 0 negative, and 3 abstain. So that motion has passed. It's a good start, Heath.
Okay, so on Tuesdays we did get through basically some discussion around must support elements, and so I'll go through those in review. We made some adjustments along the way, so I'll bring those to our attention, and hopefully we can also get some agreement on what elements are must support. If we get a little bit tied up on some of topics, I think we just move on so that we can get to a point where at least get some agreement on at least some must support elements, if that's okay. So in the context of the definition, or sorry, the scope that we talked about, in other words, the scope of care, so the subject of care, we'll talk about the subject element first. So originally I had proposed it was only an AU core patient. There was some discussion about should we support groups. I tentatively have put added that. Personally, I'm still reserved around that, because one reason is I feel that we're putting more obligation on a requester actor to support group, and in particular because we don't have group as an AU core or even an AU base, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, profile as yet, but I have included it here for consideration. The other one is that, and it is a mandatory. So you can see on the column on the left, the AU base/base composition is 0 to 1. It has a reference to resource, so it's extremely generic. But over in AU core, I'm saying it's 1 to 1. It's mandatory, must support, with a reference to AU core patient or group. So yeah, maybe if I'll let pause for comments on that.
Heath, I'm the one who proposed the addition of the group, but I will sort of put a couple of use cases forward for the broader consideration as well. Throughout the years of developing clinical documents that covers the behavioral science group and also domestic violence and sex abuse groups, there strong demand or request for including group size, which would allow the identity of the person not being explicitly revealed for the purposes of confidentiality and also privacy. So I do believe that unless we purposely exclude those kind of use cases for a fire core composition to be genuinely applicable within those contexts where the usage are actually quite prevalent. I do believe that although we do not have the AU core group profile, leaving the door open to include group will be important.
So one of the I also just want to come back to the principles that we have support for this in existing systems. And so I completely get where you're coming from, Stephen, but from a inclusion into AU core perspective. And this is on the flip side, is that we're not being too constrained, but also we're not being overly inclusive to make the obligations on systems too difficult. So that again, I'm a bit torn on making sure we're not constraining it too far, but also making sure that systems that are actually going to receive these things are able to actually process them when it's used for a use case that perhaps they're not quite able to. So what do they do with this composition if it applied to a group? I was just going to write a comment to Brett, because even in group, if I'm thinking that the members of a group is also going to be extremely generic, as in the reference up to probably any resource. Can you just check that for me, Brett, in the background?
Yeah, you got a point there.
So by doing that, we're kind of opening it up to almost all kinds of subjects of care again, or all kinds of subjects via the group. Right?
I
Yeah,
know
and
that AI Health Group are very keen in participating in interoperable digital health information exchanges. If we do not support that, we are pretty much kind of certain that that group would get a lot of the use cases unable to be supported.
But it doesn't mean that they can't use AU base. That's what we need to keep remembering. Just because we're doing a profile for AU core for this purpose doesn't stop you from doing stuff. It just means that you're not using this profile to do that stuff.
It doesn't, but it begs the question of why do we create an AU core profile while we still sort of require a percentage of the stakeholder community to go to AU base. So it kind of smells very exclusive in my opinion, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a bit more inclusive than just being a closed shop.
Okay. Anyway, so perhaps we move on from that. So we'll
Bert's
leave
got
it
his hand up.
included. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. I just want to. I think that was a really good point you made actually about group and the members of the group because we would have to think about that. So I think to even apply group well, because it brings in devices and a whole bunch of other things that we probably want to not support necessarily. I think too, like if we are saying this is, a particular kind of composition, I don't have a problem with just saying it's a single patient composition, right? And that's kind of like it gives you a tool to say, I do this. And it's not stopping you doing other kinds of composition.
But Brett, if
Anyway.
we constrain it to the subject of care being subject of care persons are not devices and other things, then we practically have made the scope a lot clearer.
Yeah, but I think then we need to have that discussion and work through and build a group profile
Yes, that's
that
my
we are
concern.
agreeing on. Yeah.
Well, we do have to build a group profile at some point in time anyway, so I just don't see how
Yeah.
we can leave group out there,
I
not even having an AU profile.
yeah,
One of our
I'm agreeing with David's
principles.
comment. David's comment is like, yeah, if we like, I think it is if we decide that that's what this profile does, I kind of think we can do that, and we if we come back to group and have a group definition, we can certainly have another composition that supports groups as well.
Well, I would have no problem with actually including group at that point because all we've said is a subject of care. It's just limited at the moment to a individual we already removed the term individual to be more inclusive, but at the moment we just don't have the profile
Yeah.
to support that doesn't then go out too broad. And going back to our principles, so it can go through the TDG, and I know this needs to be updated in the concept of working groups now, consensus building within release timeframes. So, we can't, it is questionable whether we can do a group profile to support this profile within the release timeframes of release 3.
Yeah, I feel that that's important, that we wouldn't include group just as an unconstrained group, that we actually need to go through the process in AU Core and determine what is an AU Core group.
But
And
can we
then
at least
linking that.
include that as a placeholder?
Because it's overly inclusive. But maybe if we move on, let's leave it as a placeholder, or unless I don't know what do the people want to do with this one? Do we want to can we get some sort of agreement to include it or exclude it? Do we want to do a straw man? Do we want to?
I could, let me see what I've got in my polls. We could do just ask the question without a vote. If I can find my polls.
I mean, we can come back to it later. I've got where we perhaps get a final.
Yeah, my suggestion is to leave it as a placeholder for now, and then when we come to developing the profile, we can then come back to more discussions about it. I just don't want it to be excluded at this point in time without more sort of broader conversation and discussions.
Well, we are developing the profiles, even that's what we're actually getting agreement on.
Well, I thought that we are at this moment discussing what's to be included before we go ahead and develop the profile.
With the intent to actually get agreement on what's included and with what constraints, which then basically allows editors to do their work. So I'm hoping that we can actually get some sort of agreement on this list. So
I would suggest that in that case, we don't limit the vote or the conversation here on this conference call. We make it as a broader survey or poll, maybe Zulip or conferences are sort of a place to do it.
I do have we can do a little poll. If we want to do that now. I can launch
if you've got that sorted, I think that would be good. Then we can actually move on, and then.
All right, let's see. Hopefully that's it. If I did it properly. So this isn't a vote. This is just a poll. This isn't binding. This is just what people on the call think now. Right, we've got about 19 of 24 people. So get a few more people voting if we can. No bots in here, are there? No, they're all real people. Okay, it seems to have stabilized. I don't seem to have a couple more. Yep, I think most people will have voted now. I'll end that. All right, so we had 29% yes, 38% no, and 33% I don't know. So I think that's still inconclusive.
Very inconclusive, yeah.
So I think it means we need to talk more about it, come back to it and talk more about it at a
okay.
later date.
The other topic that we talked about on Tuesday was category. So Stephen, you were quite felt that we would want to align with the FHIR clinical document
Yeah,
process.
I'm not sort of especially wedded to that, but I'm just asking a question that given that the HL7 International Fire Clinical the document IG, the composition itself makes category a support element. Do we want to align with the HL7 International Fire IG? And if we do, then we do need to look into the value set because the value set is a bit all over the place at the moment. So I'm not particularly religious on this. My preference is that it will be useful to include category as a support element because if we have a good value set, then it will assist in sort of more in high precisions in document discovery. But if we don't have it as a must support element, I won't lose much sleep over it. It's just a sort of question of is desirable to have.
So just for the call's purposes, the right-hand column is the FHIR clinical document implementation guide, which actually makes category mandatory. It has a slice of clinical note category and has a binding, which I haven't talked about. Listening to Stephen, he's concerned about the value set that's being bound on that particular slice. But
And it's example binding.
For me, the biggest problem that we have is that the purpose of AU core composition is to actually underpin AUPS, and that would mean that we would require AUPS to have a category as must support, and that is an extension beyond. Sorry, I won't use the word extension. That goes beyond what the requirements are for IPS composition. That doesn't make us incompatible with IPS, but it does mean there's an additional obligation that we would be asking Australian vendors to implement when implementing AUPS.
And
So
I
for
don't
that
have.
reason, my recommendation is that we don't include it at this point in time. And given that Stephen said that the value set is all over the place, then I would also say that's not something we can fix in the timeframes. So
Yeah, and I don't have a strong view at this point in time that we must sort of support it. My take on the conversation with the HSF International file clinical document project leads and also IPS is that at some point in time, the IPS would align with the file clinical document IG when that time occurs, then we can come back and revisit it. To me, it is a nice to have feature, but it's not something that, as I said, I've lost much sleep over it.
okay, so I've got 15 minutes left, so I'll move on because I'm not hearing, but I will take anyone else that wants to strongly feel they want category. I might skip this one for now, but very briefly, I was going to say whether we needed to make type coding mandatory and must support, as it is in AUPS and IPS. That would require us to always provide a coded type for all AU compositions. So we'll talk about that probably another time a bit more. Moving down the to sections. Also updated the section to a mandatory section. So we felt that it was defeats the purpose of having optional sections, that at least one section should be provided. So I've updated that to one to many. We also, originally my proposal was to have code and text as mandatory. I've loosened those to align with, whoops, I'll come back. Loosen that to align with I will go there to align with the via clinical document over here on the right-hand side. So that means that we don't need, it's not mandatory like it is in AUPS, but that can be constrained back into AUPS. Everything else, as you can see, attester very much aligns across the board. And then there was some, so basically with section only title is mandatory at that point. There was some discussion about entry. And initially I thought, oh yeah, maybe that was missing, but actually it was missing for a very good reason. Because in AUPS and IPS, entry and empty reason are conditional depending on the slice of the section. So mandatory sections, entry is must support, empty reason is must support, but for recommended sections, entry is also must support, but empty reason is not. And for optional sections, entry is not must support, and empty reason is not must support. So in general, there is no consistency, well, no overarching must support requirement for entry and empty reason. And you can also see FAR clinical document doesn't have entry and empty reason as must support as well. I just put in here the constraints that are actually in there. So, and this comes back to composition core. Section must contain at least one of text, entry, or subsections. So, I know we talked about subsections as well, but that's actually not being constrained. It's not being constrained out either. Subsections can be used, but basically it's saying that if you don't have an entry, you will have to have some text. So this constraint kind of tells you got to have something in this section, either text, entries, or subsections. Similarly, with empty reason, there is a constraint that basically, or invariant, that says a section can only have an empty reason if it is empty. In other words, has no entries. So that's the text is actually a little bit ambiguous, but that's what it means, is that there are no entries in that section, and that's when you apply the empty reason. So for that reason, I'm basically suggesting that we don't put any further must support constraints on entry and empty reason.
As long as they're not exclusively disallowed, explicitly disallowed, then I'm okay with that.
Nothing is disallowed, including subsections. Next one, we talked about event. And I think this is going to take a little bit of a conversation, so I might skip through it because I would like to get to a point where maybe we can get some decisions. But very briefly, we talked about the potential need for supporting search by care date, not just by document date. And the way that we actually get a care event date is through this event structure here. So that was the point around that, but the current proposal is not to provide anything. Okay. So I might skip over your scenario, Stephen, for today, if that's all right. Because there's a whole heap of stuff that we need to consider if we did include it. So again,
sure, yeah, we can.
we need to, talking about bindings, talking about event slicing, etc.
Yeah, we can pick it up at another meeting.
So in summary, what elements can we get agreement on? So this table here is what I'm proposing that we start with. So basically text 0 to 1 must support, identifier 0 to 1 must support, status 1 to 1 must support, type 1 to 1 must support, category not must support, subject 1 to 1 must support, date 1 to 1 must support, author one-to-many must support, title one-to-one must support, attester 0-many must support, with those must support sub-elements, custodian 0-1 must support, event not must support, section 1-many must support, title is 1-1 must support, and code is 0-1 must support, and text is 0-1 must support. Any comments on that? Is there any objections to any of those elements that we cannot progress?
So we can have a section with a title without a code, without text, or we have an invariant to say that you must have either code or text.
There's no invariance. Just a title.
And so you can have a title without anything
Without a code, yes.
or without text.
Well, there's the invariant that says you have to have text, entries, or
Okay,
subsections.
yeah. So that's what my question is. If we have an invariant there, that will be fine.
And that invariant is at the base level of fire.
Heath, did your previous page have text as 1-1? Section text?
No.
No? No. Good.
It was on
Yeah,
Tuesday.
Okay, on the right there, it's got section text. It's 1-1.
Sorry, that's a typo. Yep.
Okay.
So
That's
title should be 1-1.
Yeah.
So the table is what I'm proposing. So if there's no objections to this list, I would like to motion that this is the candidate set of must support elements for the AU Core composition profile, whatever we call it.
Thanks, Heath. Do we have a second for that motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that one.
Thanks, David. Any other questions before we have a vote on that?
Sorry, what I might just say, must support and the mandatory elements of subject, section, and section title.
Sorry, Heath, what was the clarification there?
So that the subject, section, and title are mandatory. Sorry, section.title is mandatory.
Yeah.
Title really reads 1-1. And we were saying that text is correct at 0-1.
Yeah. So I'm basically making a motion that the cardinalities and must supports as outlined in this second column is our candidate set. You happy with that, David?
Yes, I am.
We motion both on the mandatory and the must support elements.
So I'm happy to second on all that.
Okay. Any other questions, clarifications before I launch the vote? No, I'll launch the vote then. Okay, we've got a reasonable number voted now. I think that's most people have voted. So I'll end the poll in 3, 2, 1. And we have 17 affirmative, 0 negative, and 1 abstain. So that motion has passed. Well done, Heath.
Good work.
Okay, so my next,
We've got 4 minutes.
yeah, I don't know whether I want to go down this route, but what I wanted to do was basically get agreement on the reference types
We've got 2 minutes
for
because I need to wrap up
subject,
as well.
author, and attester party and a custodian, but I think we might skip that. Can I I just wonder whether we can motion the on the obligations, and I don't know if we even need to do this, but basically, what I would like to say is that the obligations for all of the must support elements are applying the default set of AU core obligations, which are AU core responder is shall populate if known, and AU core requester shall know error. Any suggestions on why we shouldn't do that on those must support ones that we agreed on already? In that case, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the default AU core obligations for AU core responder and AU core requester actors as shown for the
Okay,
must
thanks,
support
Heath.
elements.
Got a
But
motion.
here, I'll second Brett.
Okay, and Brett seconded that. Do we have any other questions or comments before I launch a poll on that motion? No. I'll launch the poll. Okay. Share my screen while I'm wrapping up that. So I think we've got most people, might be a couple of stragglers. Getting this vote across the line. Yep, I think we've got enough there on the chat. I'll end the poll. So we have 14 affirmative. I'll share the results. We have 0 negative and we have 1 abstain. So that motion has passed as well. Okay, that was good use of time, Heath. Squeeze that one in. You gave me 2 minutes to wrap up, which is what I said I needed. So well done. So what's coming up for AE Core? We've got an information session next week on the 9th of April on document reference. I think that's yours as well, isn't it, Heath? You're taking us through that. So you're a busy boy. Then we've got our next AE Core main call, which will continue the discussion there on the endpoint proposal. I think Heath will you'll continue talking about composition in that meeting too, by the look of it. You've still got plenty to go through in that.
Yep.
And look there, I've got 16th of April in there twice, which is interesting. The next information session is then diagnostic report. So we're going to have another information session on the 24th as well. So I've obviously doubled up that meeting there, but yeah, 2 information sessions and our regular meeting coming up. I think that next meeting agenda will be reasonably clear. We'll talk about endpoint. We'll continue talking about composition. We do still have something in the backlog for Danielle to talk to us about the AU Core address change. We'll just see what time we have for that. Is there anything else anyone has that they want to bring at this point? You can always contact co-chair and request to have something added to an agenda. So you can do that at any time if anyone has anything. But otherwise, thank you, everyone. That was our first work group call. I think it was a huge success. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Enjoy your Easter, and we'll see you back soon.
Thanks, guys. Have a good break.
We got there. You stopped the recording?